Welcome to Everything About X, the podcast where we explore fascinating topics from science, history, and philosophy. I'm Tyler, and today we're diving into a field that's all about strategy, decisions, and how we interact with each other at game theory.
And I'm Monica. Game theory isn't just about board games or video games. It's a mathematical framework for understanding strategy in any situation where individuals' choices affect one another. It's everywhere, from economics and biology to politics and even pop culture.
In this episode, we'll uncover the origins of game theory and explore its core ideas, like the Nash equilibrium. We'll also discuss how game theory applies to everything from evolutionary biology to international diplomacy. And, of course, we'll throw in some fun examples along the way.
Game theory is one of those fields that seems abstract at first, but once you understand it, you start seeing it everywhere. In business deals, traffic systems, and even why your friends can never agree on where to eat.
So, whether you're a strategist at heart or just curious about how humans and even animals make decisions, this episode will walk you through everything there is to know about game theory. Let's jump in and see where it all began.
To understand game theory, we need to start with its origins, and they go back further than you might think. The ideas behind game theory can be traced to the 18th century, when thinkers like Adam Smith explored how individuals make decisions in competitive markets. However, game theory as we know it didn't emerge until much later.
The real breakthrough came in 1928 when John von Neumann, a Hungarian-American mathematician, published a paper on the theory of parlor games. In it, he laid the mathematical foundation for analyzing strategies in games of chance and competition. This was the first step in formalizing what would become game theory.
Von Neumann's work caught the attention of economist Oscar Morgenstern, and together they published Theory of Games and Economic Behavior in 1944. This book is considered the birth of modern game theory. It introduced the idea that strategic decision-making could be applied not just to games, but to economics, politics, and other areas of human behavior.
What made von Neumann and Morgenstern's work revolutionary was their focus on rationality. They assumed that players in a game act rationally to maximize their outcomes. While this might oversimplify real-world behavior, it provided a framework that researchers could build on.
After the publication of their book, game theory gained traction, but it wasn't until the 1950s that it reached new heights. This was thanks to John Nash, a mathematician whose work extended von Neumann's ideas. Nash introduced the concept of equilibrium A state, where no player can improve their position by changing their strategy alone.
The Nash equilibrium was a game-changer, pun intended. It gave researchers a way to predict outcomes in strategic situations, even when players had conflicting interests. For this work, Nash earned a Nobel Prize in economics in 1994, cementing his place as one of the most influential figures in the field.
While Nash was refining equilibrium concepts, others were applying game theory to broader areas. For example, during the Cold War, game theory became a critical tool for understanding nuclear deterrence and conflict resolution. The idea of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, was rooted in game theoretic principles.
By the late 20th century, game theory expanded into fields like biology, where researchers used it to study animal behavior and evolutionary strategies. This was a surprising but powerful application that showed how universal these concepts could be.
Today, game theory continues to evolve, with applications in everything from artificial intelligence to social science. Its history is a testament to how mathematical ideas can grow beyond their origins to shape how we understand and navigate the world. Next, let's dive into the core concepts that make game theory so powerful.
At the heart of game theory are a few key concepts that make it such a powerful framework for understanding strategy and decision-making. Let's start with the basics. A game in game theory isn't just about fun and leisure. It's any situation where individuals or players make decisions that affect each other.
Players are the decision makers in a game, and each has a set of possible actions known as strategies. These strategies lead to specific outcomes, and each outcome carries a reward or penalty, referred to as a payoff. The goal of game theory is to analyze these interactions and predict how rational players will behave to maximize their payoffs.
Rationality is a key assumption in game theory. It assumes players always act in their best interest, making decisions that maximize their benefits. While this simplifies human behavior, it provides a foundation for creating models that can be applied in various fields.
One of the most important concepts in game theory is the distinction between cooperative and non-cooperative games. In cooperative games, players can form alliances or agreements to achieve better outcomes. In non-cooperative games, each player acts independently, often leading to competition.
Another fundamental idea is the distinction between zero-sum and non-zero-sum games. In a zero-sum game, one player's gain is another's loss. Think of a game of chess or poker. Non-zero-sum games, on the other hand, allow for outcomes where all players can benefit or lose together, such as in negotiations or resource sharing.
Game theory also differentiates between simultaneous and sequential games. In simultaneous games, players make their decisions at the same time without knowing what the others will do. In sequential games, players take turns, allowing each to respond to the previous moves.
One of the most famous concepts in game theory is the Nash equilibrium, which we mentioned earlier. It's a state where no player can improve their payoff by changing their strategy while others stick to theirs. In other words, it's a stable solution where everyone has made the best possible choice given the choices of others.
Another critical concept is the idea of dominance. A strategy is dominant if it always provides a better payoff than any other strategy, regardless of what the other players do. Dominance simplifies decision-making because it highlights the most advantageous choices.
These core concepts form the building blocks of game theory, allowing researchers to model everything from business competition to political negotiations. Now that we've covered the fundamentals, let's explore the different types of games and their real-world implications.
Now that we've covered the core concepts, let's dive deeper into the different types of games in game theory. These categories help us understand the wide variety of strategic interactions that can occur, from competitive battles to cooperative agreements.
One major distinction is between cooperative and non-cooperative games. In cooperative games, players can form binding agreements to work together and share payoffs. A great example is a labor union negotiating with an employer. They pool their resources and agree on strategies to achieve better outcomes collectively.
Non-cooperative games, on the other hand, focus on individual strategies. Players act independently, often in competition with each other. Think of a business rivalry where companies compete for market share. Each firm makes decisions based on what it thinks its competitors will do.
Another important category is zero-sum versus non-zero-sum games. Zero-sum games are situations where one player's gain equals another's loss. A classic example is a game of chess or poker, where one player's victory directly translates to the other's defeat.
In contrast, non-zero-sum games allow for mutual gains or losses. For instance, trade negotiations between countries can result in win-win outcomes where both sides benefit, or lose-lose situations if an agreement isn't reached. These types of games are particularly relevant in economics and diplomacy.
Then we have simultaneous and sequential games. Simultaneous games occur when players make decisions at the same time without knowing the choices of others. Rock, paper, scissors is a simple example. Each player's decision is made without knowledge of the other's move.
Sequential games, by contrast, involve players making decisions one after another, often with knowledge of previous moves. Chess is a perfect example. Each player adjusts their strategy based on the moves their opponent has already made. These games often require forward thinking and planning.
One of the most intriguing types of games is the prisoner's dilemma, a classic example of a non-zero-sum game. In this scenario, two players must decide whether to cooperate or betray each other. While mutual cooperation leads to the best collective outcome, individual incentives often push players to betray, resulting in a worse outcome for both.
These different types of games show just how versatile game theory can be in modeling real-world scenarios. Whether it's competitive businesses, political negotiations, or even casual decisions like where to eat with friends, These categories provide valuable insights into strategic decision-making. Up next, let's explore one of the most groundbreaking contributions to game theory, the Nash equilibrium.
Let's talk about one of the most significant breakthroughs in game theory, the Nash equilibrium. Named after mathematician John Nash, it's a concept that has transformed how we think about strategy and decision-making in competitive and cooperative scenarios.
The Nash equilibrium is a point in a game where no player can improve their outcome by unilaterally changing their strategy, assuming the other players stick to theirs. In other words, everyone's strategy is the best response to everyone else's. It's a stable solution where no one has an incentive to deviate.
To illustrate, imagine two competing businesses deciding how much to advertise. If one increases its advertising budget, it might gain more customers, unless the other does the same. At the Nash equilibrium, both have settled on a strategy that maximizes their payoffs given the other's actions.
A classic example of the Nash equilibrium is the prisoner's dilemma. If both prisoners cooperate and stay silent, they get a light sentence. But if one betrays the other, the betrayer walks free while the other faces a harsh penalty. The Nash equilibrium in this case is for both to betray, because neither can improve their outcome by cooperating unilaterally.
While the Nash equilibrium is a powerful concept, it doesn't always lead to the best collective outcome. In many cases, players acting in their self-interest can result in a suboptimal outcome for the group. Economists call this the tragedy of the commons, where individuals overuse shared resources, leaving everyone worse off.
The Nash equilibrium has applications far beyond economics and criminal justice. It's used in political science to analyze voting behavior, in biology to understand evolutionary strategies, and even in computer science for designing algorithms in networked systems.
One fascinating real-world example is its use in auctions. Auction designers use game theory to create rules that incentivize bidders to reveal their true valuations. Google's ad auction system, for instance, relies on these principles to determine how much advertisers pay for clicks.
Despite its wide applicability, the Nash equilibrium has limitations. It assumes that all players are rational and have complete knowledge of the game, which isn't always true in real-world scenarios. People often make decisions based on incomplete information or emotional factors that the model can't account for.
Still, the Nash equilibrium remains a cornerstone of game theory and a valuable tool for understanding strategic interactions. It's a concept that not only explains why people make the choices they do, but also helps design systems and policies that lead to better outcomes. Up next, we'll explore how game theory plays a critical role in economics and shapes our understanding of markets and competition.
Game theory and economics go hand in hand. Many of the most significant breakthroughs in game theory have come from trying to understand how people and businesses behave in markets. It's a field that shows us how competition and cooperation play out in everything from pricing strategies to global trade.
One of the most common uses of game theory in economics is analyzing market competition. Take oligopolies, for instance, markets dominated by a few major players. Companies in these markets often face strategic decisions about pricing and production. Game theory helps predict whether they'll compete aggressively or settle into a stable equilibrium of shared market power.
Auction theory is another fascinating application of game theory in economics. Auctions aren't just for art and antiques, they're everywhere, from government contracts to spectrum sales for telecommunications companies. Game theory helps auction designers create rules that encourage fair bidding and maximize revenue while discouraging manipulation.
Google's ad auction system is a great example. Advertisers bid for ad space, but they only pay the amount of the next highest bid. This setup, based on game theory, encourages advertisers to bid their true valuation, ensuring efficient outcomes for both buyers and sellers.
Then there's the concept of signaling and screening, which comes from game theory and applies to markets with asymmetric information. For instance, in job markets, a candidate might signal their competence by earning a degree from a prestigious university, while employers screen candidates based on these signals to make better hiring decisions.
Game theory also sheds light on international trade. Countries must decide whether to cooperate by lowering tariffs or protect their domestic markets with trade barriers. A Nash equilibrium might explain why both countries maintain barriers, even when mutual cooperation would benefit them more. A scenario similar to the prisoner's dilemma.
Public goods and shared resources are another area where game theory is crucial. Economists use it to study the tragedy of the commons, where individuals acting in their self-interest overuse a shared resource, like fisheries or clean air. Game theoretic models can help design policies to prevent such outcomes, like quotas or taxes.
Beyond traditional markets, behavioral economics incorporates game theory to study how people make decisions. Unlike classic models, which assume perfect rationality, behavioral economics accounts for human tendencies like fairness, trust, and risk aversion. This approach has led to innovations in everything from marketing strategies to public policy.
Game theory has become a cornerstone of economics because it provides a structured way to analyze strategic behavior in markets. Whether it's understanding why businesses make certain pricing decisions or designing systems like auctions to optimize outcomes, game theory offers insights that shape how economies function. Up next, we'll explore how these same principles have been adapted to biology and the natural world.
It might surprise you to learn that game theory isn't just for economists and strategists. It's also a powerful tool in evolutionary biology. In this field, game theory helps explain how animals and even humans make decisions that enhance survival and reproduction.
One of the key ideas in evolutionary game theory is the concept of an evolutionary stable strategy, or ESS. This is a strategy that, once adopted by a population, can't be invaded by an alternative strategy. Essentially, it's nature's version of the Nash equilibrium, where individuals' behaviors stabilize over time because no one can do better by changing their approach.
A classic example is the hawk-dove game. Imagine a population of animals competing over a resource. Hawks are aggressive and fight for the resource, while doves avoid conflict and share. If everyone is a hawk, the cost of constant fighting outweighs the benefit of the resource. If everyone is a dove, a single hawk can dominate. The ESS is a mix of both strategies, balancing aggression and avoidance.
Game theory also explains cooperation in nature. Take altruistic behaviors, for instance. Why would an animal sacrifice its own interests to help another? The answer often lies in kin selection or reciprocal altruism. By helping relatives, an individual ensures the survival of shared genes. Or, by helping unrelated individuals, it increases the chance of being helped in return later.
Predator-prey dynamics are another area where game theory applies. Prey animals develop strategies like camouflage or group defense, while predators adapt strategies to counter them, such as hunting in packs. The balance between these strategies often reaches an equilibrium, where neither side has an overwhelming advantage.
In mating strategies, game theory helps explain behaviors like sexual selection and mate choice. For example, peacocks with elaborate tails signal their fitness to potential mates, even though the tails make them more visible to predators. This costly signal aligns with game theoretic ideas of signaling and evolutionary trade-offs.
In human evolution, game theory sheds light on social behaviors like trust, competition, and negotiation. Consider the prisoner's dilemma in the context of early human societies. Cooperation within a group could lead to mutual benefits, such as hunting success, while betrayal might yield short-term gains, but harm long-term relationships.
What's fascinating is how game theory reveals the universality of strategic thinking. Whether it's humans in a boardroom or animals in the wild, the same principles apply. Evolutionary game theory has even inspired algorithms in AI and robotics, showing how nature's strategies can inform cutting-edge technology.
Evolutionary game theory is a reminder that strategy isn't limited to human invention. It's written into the fabric of life itself. By understanding these natural games, we gain insights not only into biology, but also into the deep connections between behavior, survival, and adaptation. Next, let's see how game theory has been used to analyze political and international relations on a global scale.
Now that we've explored game theory's fascinating role in biology and evolutionary strategies, let's shift gears and talk about how game theory has been applied in politics and international relations. This area might sound a little more intense, but trust me, it's just as intriguing as studying animal behavior.
That's right, Monica. game theory is actually a powerful tool for understanding political negotiations, conflict resolution, and even the strategies behind international diplomacy. It gives us a way to analyze the choices countries make when they're dealing with each other, often in high-stakes situations where the outcomes can be life-altering.
One of the classic applications of game theory in politics is nuclear deterrence. During the Cold War, for example, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union were locked in a tense standoff, each with the power to annihilate the other with nuclear weapons. Game theory was used to analyze the dynamics of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, where neither side would strike, because doing so would lead to total devastation for both.
The concept of MAD is a prime example of how game theory helps us understand strategic decision-making in life and death situations. In this game, both sides have the same strategy: maintain enough nuclear weapons to deter the other from attacking. But because of the Nash equilibrium, neither side wants to be the first to strike, ensuring the game stays at a tense but stable stalemate.
Game theory also plays a significant role in understanding trade negotiations between countries. In these situations, countries have to decide whether to cooperate by lowering tariffs and trade barriers or maintain protective measures to shield their own industries. The Nash equilibrium here can often explain why countries sometimes seem to act against their own economic interests, like keeping tariffs high even when mutually beneficial deals are possible.
Exactly. Trade wars are a real-world example of the prisoner's dilemma we've talked about earlier. In a situation like this, countries often find themselves locked in a cycle of retaliation, where the best option for each nation individually seems to be to betray the other by increasing tariffs, even though both would benefit from cooperation. It's a great demonstration of the challenges game theory helps to illuminate in international relations.
Another fascinating aspect of game theory in politics is its application in voting behavior. Politicians and political parties use game theoretic principles to strategize how to appeal to voters, form coalitions, and win elections. It's not just about who has the best policies, but about how candidates position themselves relative to others to maximize their chances of securing a majority.
And in international diplomacy, game theory has been used to analyze everything from peace treaties to military alliances. Take the concept of tit for tat, which is often applied in diplomatic negotiations. In this strategy, one side responds to the other's actions in kind. If one country takes an aggressive action, the other retaliates similarly, which can either escalate a conflict or stabilize it, depending on the situation.
So, whether it's understanding why countries act in seemingly irrational ways during trade disputes, analyzing the risks of war, or figuring out the best strategies for political campaigns, game theory gives us a way to make sense of the strategies that drive global decisions. It's a testament to how the tools of game theory can be applied to everything from the battlefield to the ballot box.
It's clear that game theory isn't just a dry academic concept. It has real-world implications that shape the global stage. Whether we're talking about international diplomacy or local politics, game theory helps us navigate the complex and often unpredictable world of strategic interactions. And just like in biology, these insights have the power to change the way we approach problems, think critically, and make decisions that affect not only ourselves, but the entire world.
Now that we've explored game theory's role in politics and international relations, it's time to turn the spotlight on some of the critiques and limitations of the field. Despite its widespread applications, game theory has its share of critics who question its assumptions and real-world effectiveness.
That's right, Monica. One of the most significant criticisms of game theory is its assumption of rationality. In most game theoretic models, it's assumed that players are always acting in their best interest and making decisions that maximize their payoffs. But let's be honest, people aren't always rational. We've all made decisions that don't necessarily align with our best interests, whether it's buying something we didn't need or making an impulsive choice in a stressful situation.
Exactly. And this leads to another problem: game theory doesn't always account for the complexities of human emotions and biases. People often make decisions based on incomplete information, personal beliefs, or even gut feelings, which can lead to outcomes that are far from what a game theoretic model would predict. Take politics, for example. Voters don't always make decisions based on a strict cost-benefit analysis. Emotions, identity, and social pressures play a huge role.
Another limitation is that game theory often oversimplifies real-world scenarios. Many game theoretic models rely on strict assumptions, like players knowing exactly what their opponents will do, or having perfect knowledge about the game. In reality, most people don't have that level of insight or information. In real-world situations, players are often guessing or making decisions with limited knowledge, which can lead to unpredictability and less optimal outcomes.
And then there's the issue of modeling complexity. Game theory provides a framework, but it doesn't always offer solutions to the messiness of human interactions. In many cases, the models can be too abstract to be directly applicable to real-world scenarios. For instance, while game theory can help predict general trends in market behavior, it struggles to account for the full range of factors that influence how a business might actually act in a given situation, like cultural context, personal values, or even simple mistakes.
You also run into ethical concerns when applying game theory to sensitive issues. For example, in fields like international diplomacy or military strategy, the potential consequences of game theoretic decisions can be catastrophic. The assumption that players will always act rationally to maximize their own benefits doesn't necessarily account for moral considerations. Should we really trust a model that encourages actions based solely on self-interest, especially when human lives are at stake?
That's a valid point, Tyler. And even in less extreme situations, the rationality assumption can still lead to ethically questionable results. For example, game theory can sometimes encourage behaviors like exploitation or selfishness if it's modeled that way. In a business context, this might mean that companies end up taking advantage of workers or customers if they think it'll maximize their profits, which, while rational in the game theoretic sense, can be morally problematic.
On top of all that, game theory often doesn't have clear solutions for real-world problems. The Nash equilibrium, while useful, doesn't always lead to the most desirable or fair outcome for everyone involved. In many cases, it's a stable solution, but that stability might come at the cost of fairness, equality, or long-term sustainability. This is what's known as the Pareto inefficiency, when there's no way to improve someone's outcome without making someone else worse off, even though better outcomes might be possible if everyone cooperated.
Despite all these limitations, game theory remains an incredibly powerful tool for understanding strategic decision-making. It's not perfect, but it gives us a framework for analyzing complex situations and predicting outcomes in a way that nothing else really can. The key is to acknowledge its limitations and apply it with a critical eye, understanding that real-world interactions are often much messier than the neat equations and models we see on paper.
In the end, game theory provides valuable insights into human behavior, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's just one lens through which we can view the world, and like any tool, it's best used with an understanding of its strengths and weaknesses. And with that, we've covered some of the major critiques of game theory. Up next, we'll look at some of the exciting modern advancements in the field and how it continues to evolve today. Moving on from critiques and limitations, let's dive into some of the exciting modern advances in game theory. This field has come a long way since its origins, and with the integration of new technologies and interdisciplinary approaches, game theory is evolving in ways that could reshape everything from economics to artificial intelligence.
That's right, Tyler! One of the most significant developments in recent years has been the integration of computational models and artificial intelligence into game theory. Traditional game theory relied heavily on mathematical equations, but now, with the help of computers, researchers can simulate complex scenarios with far more accuracy and detail. This opens up new possibilities for understanding strategic decision-making in situations that were once too complicated to model effectively.
These computational models have enabled researchers to explore new types of games and predict outcomes in real-world scenarios with much greater precision. For example, AI algorithms can simulate multi-agent systems, where multiple players interact and evolve over time. This is a huge leap forward, especially in fields like economics, where understanding the dynamics of competition, cooperation, and market behavior is essential.
Another exciting development is the application of game theory in network theory. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected through digital networks, understanding how information spreads and how individuals or organizations interact within these networks has become crucial. Game theory is being used to model everything from social media behavior to the spread of viruses, helping us to better understand the dynamics of these complex systems.
Speaking of networks, game theory has also found a home in the rapidly expanding field of behavioral economics. While traditional economics assumed that people acted purely rationally, behavioral economics incorporates insights from psychology and sociology to understand how human behavior deviates from strict rationality. By combining game theory with behavioral insights, researchers can better predict how people make decisions in real-world settings, from choosing products to voting in elections.
Game theory's reach doesn't stop there. It's also making waves in the world of machine learning. AI systems that rely on reinforcement learning often use game theoretic principles to optimize their strategies. In fact, game theory is the foundation of many algorithms that help AI learn from interactions, improving its decision-making capabilities over time. This is especially important in areas like robotics, where machines need to make decisions in dynamic environments.
And let's not forget about the rise of evolutionary game theory. While traditional game theory often focused on human decision-making, evolutionary game theory applies the same concepts to biological systems. This approach has helped explain everything from animal behavior to the evolution of cooperation among species. It's also inspired the development of new algorithms for solving problems in artificial life and complex systems modeling.
On the social side of things, game theory is being used to understand and address some of the most pressing global challenges. For instance, researchers are using game theory to design policies that encourage cooperation in the face of climate change. By modeling the interactions between countries and industries, game theory can help us develop strategies for reducing emissions, managing resources, and sharing the burden of global responsibility.
Finally, game theory continues to influence fields like cryptography and cybersecurity. As digital threats evolve, game theory is being used to anticipate the strategies of hackers and defend against cyber attacks. The same principles that help us understand competition and cooperation in economics and politics are being applied to protect sensitive information and secure digital infrastructures worldwide.
These modern advances in game theory show how dynamic and far-reaching the field has become. From AI and machine learning to global policy and cybersecurity, game theory is no longer confined to the realm of abstract mathematics. It's a tool that helps us navigate the complexities of the modern world, offering insights that can shape the future of technology, society, and beyond. Up next, we'll wrap up the episode with some fun and surprising applications of game theory that you might not expect. Now that we've covered the advanced, high-stakes applications of game theory, let's have a little fun and look at some surprising ways game theory shows up in everyday life. You might not realize it, but the principles of game theory are often lurking behind the scenes, influencing decisions in ways you'd never expect.
That's right, Monica. Take something as simple as splitting a bill at a restaurant. It sounds like an innocent social interaction, but it's actually a mini-game. Each person has a choice to either pay their share or try to offload a little extra onto someone else. The strategies might vary. Do you stick to the principle of fairness, or do you take the chance that someone else will pick up the slack? Game theory can help explain how we decide and why sometimes we might end up paying more than we wanted to.
Exactly. And how about the classic "where do we eat" dilemma? Anyone who's ever tried to plan a group outing knows the struggle of getting everyone to agree on a place. Game theory can actually model this situation as a coordination game, where the goal isn't necessarily to find the best restaurant, but simply to make sure that everyone is happy with the decision. The challenge is coordinating preferences, and sometimes the most efficient outcome is simply finding any place where the group can agree.
This idea of coordination doesn't just apply to food choices either. Game theory is often used to model how people coordinate their behavior in everyday situations like driving. In traffic, there are unwritten rules about how we navigate lanes, when we should yield, and how we react to other drivers. Everyone is trying to get from point A to point B, but we rely on unspoken coordination to avoid accidents. It's a perfect example of a non-zero-sum game where everyone's success depends on the cooperation of others.
And then there's the whole realm of online platforms, auctions, marketplaces, and even social media. Take eBay, for example. Bidders are essentially playing a game, trying to figure out how much to bid without overpaying. The strategy here involves trying to predict what others will do while maximizing your chances of winning the item at a reasonable price. Google's ad auctions are a similar case, where companies bid for advertising space, and the strategies involve understanding how much to bid based on what competitors are willing to pay.
Speaking of ads, have you ever wondered how companies decide on the best price for their products? Well, game theory has something to say about that too. Pricing strategies often involve some level of game theoretic thinking, especially when businesses are competing for the same customers. Companies have to balance how much to charge with how much they think their competitors will charge. If everyone lowers their prices too much, nobody wins. But if everyone holds firm, there could be a better collective outcome.
Another fun application is in the world of sports. Whether it's professional leagues, college games, or even pickup basketball, players are constantly making decisions based on the strategies of their opponents. Coaches and players use game theory to plan out their moves, anticipate what the other side will do, and adjust their tactics accordingly. From football plays to penalty kicks in soccer, the principles of game theory help athletes think several steps ahead.
And let's not forget board games and video games, where game theory is literally the foundation of the game itself. Think about chess, for example, a game where each player must consider not only their own moves, but also predict the opponent's strategy. Even more complex strategy games like Risk or Settlers of Catan are built around game theoretic principles, as players constantly need to anticipate and react to each other's decisions to stay ahead.
Game theory is also present in many of the strategic decisions we make in relationships. For instance, in a romantic relationship, partners often engage in a subtle form of negotiation over things like shared responsibilities, time management, and even the who's driving question. These seemingly small decisions can be analyzed using game theory to understand the unspoken strategies and outcomes that both individuals are aiming for.
From choosing a dinner spot to navigating complex market behaviors, game theory pops up in ways we never really think about. It's a tool that helps us make sense of the strategies that guide our decisions, even in the most mundane situations. And whether we're dealing with traffic, friends, or auctions, understanding game theory gives us a better way to navigate the world of choices, risks, and rewards.
So, as you can see, game theory isn't just for academics or politicians. It's something that shapes our everyday lives in all sorts of surprising ways. Whether we're trying to cooperate with others or outsmart them, the principles of game theory are always at play. It's not just a science, it's a lens through which we can better understand the strategic nature of human behavior. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of Everything About X. We've covered a lot of ground, from the origins of game theory to its modern applications in everything from politics to daily life. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of how game theory shapes the world around us.
Absolutely. Whether it's predicting the outcome of a business negotiation or understanding how animals make survival decisions, game theory gives us a framework to think strategically about our choices. It's not just for economists or mathematicians. It's a powerful tool that touches almost every part of our lives.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into game theory, be sure to like, share, and comment on the episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts and any fun examples of game theory you've encountered in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to Everything About X so you never miss an episode.
You can also support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/everythingaboutx. There, you can get ad-free versions of the show and help us continue bringing you the best content every week. Thanks for tuning in.
Until next time, keep strategizing and stay curious. We'll be back next week with another exciting topic. See you then. Everything About X is a product of SynthCast Media. If you enjoyed this program, be sure to check out all the other great shows we produce at synthcastmedia.com. Patrons get ad-free versions of all our episodes, So sign up today by going to patreon.com/everythingabouTX. Our ad partners make this show possible. You can support this program by supporting them.